Hey guys, thank you very much for joining us for another story here at Annie Narrates. Today's story style goes like this. Evil sister and mom make me cry on my wedding by announcing her engagement even before I get married. But then this crazy thing happens, and karma does its job as her fiance breaks off the engagement on the spot, and now they want me to help convince him that all this happened with my consent. So I'll get right into it. I, 26 female, got married to my boyfriend from college, Jake, 26 male, about 3 days back. We've been together since our first semester, and it's been almost 8 years now. It was a wonderful ceremony with just one blip, and that was my sister-in-law, Abigail, 23 female, announcing her engagement right before I was about to get married. My mother-in-law, Frankie, 52 female, was the mastermind behind it. I know that for a fact, and I don't even need to prove it, because the two of them have always had it for me and couldn't stand the fact that I was getting married to Jake in spite of everything that they put me through. So they just had to go out of their way and do something to make me cry on my wedding day. I was never able to figure out why they didn't like me until Jake told me about a year into our relationship that they were just like this and couldn't stand any women who dated him. So it wasn't a me problem, but rather a them problem. I thought that they would accept me eventually, but that never happened. And the longer that I stayed with Jake, the more that they started to hate me. They were really mean to me all the time, and after a while, I started handing it right back to them. So if they made some comment about me, then I would do the same to them, and it would be like a mini catfight every time we met. But it was nothing I couldn't handle, so I didn't let it get to me. At times it would get on my nerves, but I didn't let it show on my face how much it was bothering me. Jake offered to talk about this to Abigail and Frankie several times, but I always declined because then it would seem like I was losing or whatever. I even told him not to jump to my defense when his mother or sister would be attacking me, because I wanted to show them that I wasn't weak and they couldn't just drive me away by being mean to me. It was all just crazy mind games, and Jake didn't understand any of it. But he respected my opinions, so he didn't interfere in it. I never asked him to cut his family off because I knew that he was very attached to his father, and even though his mother and sister were a nightmare, he did have love for them as well. And that's the way that it was until Abigail started dating my best friend. That's when things started getting a little too intense for me, because while Jake never defended his sister and never even claimed that she was a wonderful person otherwise, my best friend did. And I just couldn't accept it. Dylan, 26 male, was my best friend from middle school and also my neighbor growing up. He was practically my brother, so it came as a real shock to me when he told me that he was interested in Abigail. They met at Jake's birthday party a couple of years ago and really hit it off, but I was too busy attending to the guests to pay any attention to what they were doing. I only heard about it from Dylan a couple of days after the party, and by then, it was too late for me to do anything and warn him about what kind of person Abigail was. I had told him a couple of times about how she was kind of mean to me, but I didn't really discuss things about Frankie and Abigail outside of my home with Jake, not even with my parents, because they're not that important. So he never really got to know exactly how mean she was. After the party, they started going out and eventually they were into a relationship, which was really weird for me. Because now Dylan was consistently trying to convince me that Abigail was a nice girl, but she was just quote-unquote misunderstood. He told me several times to try and give her a chance to prove that she could be a nice friend. After a few months, I got so annoyed by it that I had to tell him that he was not allowed to discuss Abigail with me, simply because it got on my nerves. He didn't stop completely, but he decreased the number of times that he would mention her in a conversation considerably. Which was still better, because I was just sick of hearing about her and how great she was as a person, because that's not what my experience was. And nobody could fool me into believing that she was a good human being, since good people don't just pick on others and try to make them feel bad about themselves for no reason. Abigail would also occasionally bring up Dylan, or make it a point to talk about how much he thought of her whenever we were hanging out with her family or whatever. She would just try and rub it in my face that she was dating my best friend, and there was no way we were getting rid of her so easily, because even if her brother wasn't on her side, mine was. So it's safe to say that everything was quite political in our family, and Frankie would also never pass up on an opportunity to talk about how great it would be if Jake and I got married, and then Dylan and Abigail got married around the same time, and then we would all get together all the time. The very idea of it made me kinda queasy, but I just had to smile through it. But then Jake proposed a few months ago, and I said yes, and I finally felt like I'd won because in spite of their many attempts to put me down and drive me away from Jake, Frankie and Abigail had failed, and I was finally going to get married to the guy of my dreams. To my surprise, they seemed okay with it after a few months of our engagement, and even started joining in on the wedding preparations during the last few weeks quite happily, as if they were completely on board with this. I should have figured out that there was something fishy going on, but I was too busy enjoying my time as a bride-to-be to pay any attention to what was going on around me. Even Jake had noticed how weird and happy his mother and sister were acting about this whole thing, but we just chalked it up to them finally realizing that they weren't going to be able to push me away anymore and accepting their defeat. And then, finally, on the day of my wedding, I realized why they'd been so okay with everything during the last couple of weeks. Right after I'd walked down the aisle, Frankie walked up to the mic and announced that her daughter had some great news to share with us. Jake and I froze, because we were shocked since this wasn't a part of the plan. And then, Abigail grabbed the mic and announced that Dylan had proposed to her a few weeks ago, and she'd said yes. And then she flashed the ring on her finger to everyone sitting around. After that, it was just a blur of people coming up to her and congratulating her, and everybody in Jake's family going gaga over the ring because they assumed that this was something we'd planned. I say that it was a blur because that's how I was seeing everything due to the tears in my eyes, and I walked off a few minutes later so I could have some time to myself and process what just happened. Just to be clear, I wasn't upset that Dylan and Abigail were going to get married, but I was really upset that they had stolen my thunder at my own wedding, and now all that people were going to be talking about was their engagement. Jake followed after me while trying to console me and telling me that he would get this fixed immediately, even though he had no idea how, but for me, it was just enough that he was there for me. So we sat on a bench outside the venue for a few minutes while I cried on his shoulder. About 5 minutes later, my dad came running towards us and told us that Abigail and Dylan were arguing and we needed to go sort things out. That was crazy to us because from what we just heard, they were engaged, so I didn't see any reason for them to be fighting just a few minutes after they had announced their engagement. We went back in only to see a full-blown fight taking place while everybody just looked on in confusion. It took me a few seconds to come up to speed, but I figured that Dylan had probably not been on the plan where Abigail would announce their engagement right before my vows. And by my reaction, he judged that I was not in on it either, and this hadn't been done with my consent, which is why he was fighting with Abigail over that. Abigail was lying through her teeth and trying to convince him that I was just trying to stir up the trouble for them because I'd been informed about their plan well in advance and I'd agreed to it. Everybody just looked extremely confused, and when Dylan realized that I was finally back, he asked me if I had been informed about Abigail's plan, and I said no. Then Dylan turned back towards Abigail and told her that I'd been right about her all along, and she actually was just a bad person. He demanded that she return the ring to him and announced that they were no longer engaged because he had just broken it off with her, and then walked out, with Abigail running after him. Frankie also ran after them, but not before she used a select few curse words for me. I was shocked at whatever was going on since Dylan was actually supposed to be one of the groomsmen, but now he was gone, and so was the mother of the groom and the sister of the groom. But I was determined to get married that day, and I wasn't about to let them get in the way of that. I was already done crying, so we went ahead with the ceremony, even though it was kind of uncomfortable and awkward after that. But once we exchanged our vows, Jake and I realized that it didn't really matter to us what everybody else thought. What mattered was standing right here in front of us. And it sounds corny and cheesy and all sorts of sappy, but it's true. We didn't care who left and who stayed. All that mattered was that we were together. After that, nobody brought up the incident before the vows, and even though it was kind of strange, we did socialize with the guests and try to make things as normal as they could be under those circumstances. My parents thought that we dealt with it pretty well, and so did Jake's dad. He even apologized to us for the actions of his wife and daughter, which was really nice of him because we knew that this wasn't his fault, but he was still embarrassed. And I kinda get it. I would be too if people related to me were behaving that way. But anyway, we went on with the wedding and tried to make the best of our day despite whatever had happened right before that. We didn't hear back from Dylan, Abigail, or Frankie until yesterday, which was actually surprising because I had expected at least one of them to contact me right after the wedding. Dylan hasn't contacted me yet, not even to apologize, but I guess he'll come around eventually. However, Frankie has reached out to me, but she wasn't apologizing to me either. She called us yesterday on Jake's phone and told us that we had to contact Dylan somehow and tell him that everything had been done with my consent. She wanted us to change his mind because he dumped Abigail and had blocked her everywhere, so she couldn't even get to him anymore. Apparently, Abigail was miserable now and hadn't stopped crying ever since they broke up. It makes sense because they had been together for quite some time now, and if they were engaged to be married, then that obviously meant that they were serious about each other. But I didn't think that it was my responsibility to fix things between them. So I said that I wasn't going to talk to Dylan, and they had to make things better with him on their own. They hadn't involved me on their decision to announce the engagement at my wedding, and that was the truth. I wasn't going to lie to anybody to cover up for them. When I told Frankie that, she freaked out and started screaming at me, calling me a jealous and insecure saboteur who just couldn't stand the fact that Abigail was finally going to be happy. None of it made sense because I think it had always been the other way around, and they were the ones constantly trying to sabotage my relationship with Jake. I couldn't care less about Abigail. Even if she did get married to Dylan, I wouldn't care. What I did care about was her announcing it at my wedding right before my vows. So after some meaningless arguing, where both of us just attacked each other verbally, I decided to hang up because I didn't want to give them the time of day by actually entertaining that stupid little spat. I told Jake to block her for a while because otherwise, she would just keep bothering us. And the wedding is already pretty fresh in my mind. I don't need a replay of that fiasco over and over again. But even that didn't work because she just got other relatives and a couple of her friends to do her dirty work for her. And now they're the ones texting us and trying to tell us that Abigail just made a little mistake, but that shouldn't cost her so much. Everybody's telling us to talk to Dylan and get him to reply to Abigail and at least try and clear the air with her. Apparently everybody believes that what Abigail did was not cool, but she really loves Dylan. And if not for her sake, then I should at least talk to him as his best friend, but I really don't want to. So, am I the a-hole for not trying to fix my sister-in-law's relationship with her boyfriend, who happens to be my best friend? Okay, so I decided that I am not the villain here, in spite of what Jake's mom and his family think. At least Jake doesn't agree with it, and that's the only opinion that matters to me. Abigail is still miserable, and it's been almost a week, but now instead of just crying and moping in silence like she was before, she's decided that she's going to slander me online and say all sorts of rubbish about me. It's been 3 days of her putting up stories about me and saying the worst things that she can possibly come up with, along with several curse words, some of which are just really filthy. I don't know what exactly she hopes to achieve by doing this because now she's just lost the support that she was receiving from her family, since none of them are texting me or Jake anymore and trying to convince us to talk to Dylan. So if anything, this has just put her in a worse position than she was before. Frankie hasn't given up yet and is still going strong and gunning for Jake and me to contact Dylan and tell him to at least talk to Abigail. Jake unblocked her but has muted her, so it's pointless for her. We haven't heard from Dylan even now, and it's pretty weird because this is probably the longest we've gone without talking even once. I mean, usually we do send each other memes occasionally, but now it's just radio silence. I'm actually worried for him, so I did talk to his parents, but they don't know where he went after that wedding debacle either. I even spoke to his landlord but was told that he wasn't home since the wedding, and we're all beginning to get really worried for him because it's really unlike him to just disappear without a word. He did deactivate his socials a couple of days back, so we know that he's alive. But it's pretty difficult to find out where he is when he's not active anywhere on social media, isn't responding to calls, and not replying to texts. Granted, neither Jake nor I have personally reached out to him yet, and I have this strange feeling that he might reply if one of us reaches out. But then again, we're all really egoistic sometimes, and I'm hoping that he will text us first because I feel like he owes that to me. I don't blame him for what happened at the wedding, but I really feel like he shouldn't have defended Abigail, even though he knew that our relationship was strained. I kind of feel like he should have been a little more serious when I was telling him that Abigail was not the kind of person that he wanted to be with. And so now, he should be the one reaching out to me first. I know that is a very entitled thing to expect, but I don't really care. We have had a lot of fights before, but this is a big deal for me. And I guess for him too. Jake believes that he will come around, and I know that, but I just want him to accept certain things sooner rather than later. I just really hope that he texts me soon, and we're able to talk things out. Hey everybody. So I know that everybody has been waiting for an update for quite some time now, and I don't blame you guys. But Dylan took his own sweet time coming around, which is why this update is coming almost 3 weeks after my last one. Of course, a lot of things have happened as well, thanks to Abigail and Frankie, but I'll get into that later. 2 days ago, Dylan finally reached out to me after not speaking to us for almost a month. We knew that he was okay because his parents told us that he had come back home, and apparently he'd been living in a hotel a little out of town for a couple of days after the incident at my wedding because he was too depressed to come back and face anybody. And even after that, he needed time to actually talk to people because that breakup had really shaken him up and he wanted some time away from everything. And that's why we weren't able to reconnect until a couple of days ago. We didn't even plan on meeting or anything, but he just turned up at my house with several boxes of chocolates and my favorite wine. He also brought Jake his favorite Chinese takeout for lunch, and that was all the apology that we needed. Honestly, he didn't even need to apologize now that I think about it because this was not his fault. He told us that he really did like Abigail, and with him, she was a different person. I can't deny that. But I guess she overestimated how important she was and went ahead and did something cruel to me, just to show that she could and believed that she could get away with it, but unfortunately, Dylan wasn't bound to her by blood unlike Jake, and I guess she forgot that he could just leave if she acted out. And that's exactly what happened, because no matter what, Dylan and I were practically siblings, and he didn't appreciate her trying to constantly hurt me, but still tried to defend her because she was different from him. Usually it was just verbal, but what she did at the wedding was unforgivable, and he knew that he had to leave. But it wasn't an easy task, which is why he'd been so down in the dumps, and we could totally forgive that. So we had lunch together and we forgave him because people do screw up, and it's completely human, so we can't hold that against him. At least he came back to his senses and apologized. Now, coming to what Abigail and Frankie had been up to in the past couple of weeks. So like I said, Abigail had constantly been putting up stories about me and saying a lot of horrible stuff, but nobody was buying it after what they witnessed at the wedding. So when she got tired of that, she decided that she was going to take it a notch further and message some of my colleagues about what had happened at the wedding and told them a completely distorted version of it. She said that apparently I had agreed to let her announce the engagement at my wedding, and then, at the very last moment, I flipped, and that's what made Dylan break up with her. Now, most of my colleagues had been present at the wedding, and they saw what had happened, but even then, it was pretty embarrassing, and that was my last straw. So I decided to file a defamation lawsuit against her because this could have very well ruined my reputation at work. It didn't because my boss was on good terms with me, and she realized that this was just a family drama and my sister-in-law was trying to mess with me, but it was still unacceptable. So far, she's been refusing to apologize or pay me $5,000 in settlement, which is a very measly amount, and I think it's ridiculously stupid of her because I'm giving her an easy way out, and she's still refusing to take it. Frankie has been rallying for her daughter and encouraging this BS and has even started posting #JusticeForAbby, which is insane if you think about it. If anything, I should be the one demanding justice because they literally ruined my wedding ceremony on purpose. I have half a mind to add that to the list of things I should sue her for, but unfortunately, she didn't exactly damage any property, and we still had the wedding, so I can't because of technicalities. Believe me, I would love nothing more than to sue her for it, but my lawyer has advised me against it. The point is that the two of them are acting absolutely crazy, and this time, not even any of their family members are on their side. So I don't know what makes them think that they're going to get away with this. Even Jake's dad seems fed up with them, and since he has been in touch with us, he keeps venting to us about how ridiculous his wife and daughter are. He told us that they're not even willing to listen to him, even though he's the one who is paying for the lawyer. I'm pretty confident that I'm going to walk away with an apology and the $5,000 that I'm demanding. It's just a matter of time until they realize that they're going to lose. I would just advise Frankie and her daughter not to be such psycho-insecure weirdos, because that might lead to all the men in their life leaving them like Dylan leaving Abigail. And I'm pretty sure that Jake's father would have left his wife a long time back, but it's only sticking it out because he's too kind of a human being to abandon her, because he knows that nobody else will ever take her in, for obvious reasons. Hey guys, I won, so yay me. I'm thrilled right now, this feels big. Frankie and Abigail are so screwed, and I couldn't be happier if I tried. I'm not the kind of person who usually rejoices in someone else's downfall, but they definitely deserve this. I am certainly going to put this money to good use with my husband and go crazy. Can't wait. Alright guys, that was it for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Smash that like button for me and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again, we'll be seeing you in the next one.